Hello, Brick Lane. Throughout this fall, I have been studying through the book of Hosea, and some time ago, Pastor Steve lent me several of his commentaries to help me in that work. One of them has been exceptionally helpful. This morning, I was studying Hosea chapter 10, in which Israel is described as a luxuriant vine that is consistently bearing horrible fruit. And James Boyce picks that imagery up and compares and contrasts that image of a vine in Hosea 10 to John 15, where Jesus describes himself as the vine. I hope you will bear with me for just a few moments as I read to you. I was so uplifted by what I read this morning in this commentary. I wanted to share it with you. Hope it'll encourage. I'm reading here first from John 15, and then I'll read Boyce's comments on it. Jesus says, "Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me, and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing." Here are Boyce's comments on that passage. He says, "Religion stands over the cripple and says to him, 'You're not walking properly. In fact, you are not walking at all. Here's how you should do it.' But he cannot. He simply lies there. Christianity takes hold of his hand and says, 'In the name of Jesus Christ, rise up and walk.' As a result, new life surges through his twisted body. It is union with Christ, and only union with Christ, that gives us power to live a godly and fruitful life in this world. A great promise is given to us if we do abide in Jesus. It is that we shall be fruitful. I do not know if you ever get discouraged in your Christian work or witness, but I assure you that I do. I'll remind you here that we're reading James Boyce, the late pastor of 10th Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia and a prolific author, got discouraged because he was feeling unfruitful in his Christian work. Amazing. When we get discouraged, it is good to turn to a verse like this and find Christ saying that if we abide in him, as he tells us to, then we will be fruitful, whether we see the fruit of our efforts or not. I am not a horticulturalist, but I'm told by those who know such things that a vine needs to be cultivated at least 3 years before being allowed to produce fruit at all. That is, it must be trimmed and allowed to grow, then be trimmed and allowed to grow again, and so on for a considerable length of time. Only after this does it become useful for bearing fruit. In the same way, there are times in our lives when we seem to go for considerable periods, undergoing rather radical treatments at the hand of the Father, and seeing very little fruit come from it. In such times, we doubt if there will ever be the fruit of righteousness, truth, and love. But that is only because we cannot see as God sees. We do not have his perspective. Do not get discouraged if that happens to you. Instead, remember that Jesus promises fruit in due time if we truly abide in him. Ultimately, God is the one responsible for the vineyard, and he has determined that his vineyard will be fruitful. Isn't that encouraging? Isn't that good? Our bearing fruit depends on a relationship, not on gritting our teeth and pulling ourselves up by the bootstrap. Not a lot I can add to James' Boyce, and so I won't. I hope you're uplifted today and encouraged, Brick Lane.